I really enjoyed the conversation that you had with Richard earlier this week. Super, super insightful. Thank you so much for digging into the details, and huge kudos also to you for like just putting your personal opinion aside for the moment and really just focusing on like trying to get to the bottom of exactly what it is that happened. It was one of the best pieces of content I encountered this week on just
You're being too nice. Thank
what,
you.
yeah,
Stop.
what is the deal? But that said, like, now we've let it breathe for a little bit. You've been objective about this. And so now I want to cease being objective and give you an opportunity to just give your personal opinion. So, Farzad, how do you react to Miss Judge up in Delaware rescinding Elon's $55 billion pay package? And feel free to be as opinionated as you want to be.
Oh boy. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So big thanks to Richard for coming on the channel. Not legal advice. We had this conversation back Tuesday or Wednesday. I forget exactly which day, but it was super informative for me. It helped me form what I believe is an educated opinion. For those that follow this channel know that I follow the Tesla story very closely. I'm an investor. I've worked at the company, so obviously there's going to be some sort of inherent bias here as I talk through. So my goal here was to just separate as much of my bias as I can and understand the ruling for what it is. So what really bugs me ultimately is that the decision was made with the sort of within the context of protecting investors, right? So the ruling is, okay, so we think that Tesla didn't do a good job in communicating and being transparent about the relationship between Elon Musk and the board when they were coming up with the package. So they came up with 55 billion. The $55 billion number, the judge felt like there wasn't enough back and forth happening, enough haggling happening to arrive to that number. And the board wasn't good at sharing that process with investors. Okay. So then the judge says, okay, because you didn't do that, this package, it doesn't fit the criteria of it being valid for a public company to arrive to this number, even though investors voted yes for the package. And so you have to go back and do it again so that you're actually doing it in the best interest of investors. I think what gets missed in this entire thing, which is really at the root of why I'm so frustrated, is that how come the judge gets to decide, how come her decision supersedes the investors voting yes on the package? That's like the fundamental issue I have here, because what she's basically saying is that she knows, based on what the plaintiff brought forward, she knows more than the investors that voted on the package. So let's role play this, right? If say the board and Elon sat down and came up with a package in good faith, right? Whatever that means, right? Fair for the investor so that they're not overpaying the richest man in the world, which is literally the first sentence of the opinion is the richest man in the world being overpaid. So she is automatically saying she's creating that environment for her to judge what is a quote unquote fair payment for a person, right? So say the board and Elon sit down and have a fair agreement on what the package should be. What is the likelihood that the amount would be any different than $55 billion? Especially when you go back to 2018 and you look at for what the package was worth. If you look at every single person that covered the package, every single person that looked at the goals that were set, the fact that Elon wouldn't be getting paid at all unless there was an initial threshold that would be hit on the comp package would be, I think at the time, more than double the market cap of the company. So he would have had to double the company size and the valuation before he even start to get paid, okay? You go back to that time, and then you look at through that lens, and then you're going to say that the package somehow is unfair is ridiculous. Because if anything, it was unfair to the person who signed it at first. It would become fair once or let's say, quote unquote, more than fair once the targets were hit, right? But because you brought it forward to an investor base, and then the investor base, regardless of how that number came through, right? I'm not even saying that Tesla did a good job by not being transparent. If you're going to have merit in this case, I agree with that point where maybe Tesla should have been a little bit more transparent. Great. But that's besides the point. The point here is that the number was agreed upon by investors. 70 some odd % of investors said, yes, this is a package we want. And the truth of the matter is the reason why investors said yes to the package is because of Elon. It's because of the individual. And I don't understand why the judge has the ability to supersede the will of investors. It's just so weird, because basically what she's saying is that the investors didn't know any better. That individual, that person with the 9 shares that came forward saying like, this is not in good faith, this is not good for investors, this is crazy, this is what a crazy number you guys are coming up with. That person is just ignoring the will of the majority of investors that approved that package to go through, because it was so ambitious and so crazy for its time, right? So that really bugs me, because now we're basically saying that a judge in Delaware has the ability to decide what is a fair comp package for a CEO. And I think the long-term effects of this, as it pertains to Delaware, I think are huge. It's a can of worms. I think this is not just a Tesla story. This is a business story, because now all of a sudden you have an environment where you can have, firms and people who are going to want to try to make a buck to basically open this lawsuit for every single public company that's incorporated in Delaware, and they're going to question all the comp packages by saying, was this done in good faith? Was this done fairly? And now every single one of those companies is going to have to deal with this. I would be shocked if that doesn't happen. So it's, and that's some of my thoughts too. Like I haven't even, there's more in there, but at the core, that's what's really bugging me. It's like a judge is superseding the will of the investors, and for some reason, like somehow that's okay. And like, okay, just, you guys don't know what you're talking about. I am the judge. I know what I'm talking about. And here's the deal. Like, why not just fine Tesla and Elon a sum? Why not just say, okay, you were bad at being transparent about your relationship, $10 million fine, $20 million fine. I don't care. Pick a number, whatever that number is, right? Because now what's going to happen, here's the craziness of this situation. What's going to happen now is, with Tesla moving to Texas and incorporating in Texas, I think the obvious next step for the company is going to be to come out with a new comp package while being incorporated in Texas, so that they can avoid the craziness of Delaware. And they're going to come up with a package that's going to be forward-looking and backwards-looking to try and make Elon whole, okay? To think that number is going to be anything other than $55 billion, I think is super, super unlikely. I think they're just going to give him the $55 billion. And if the appeal doesn't work in Delaware, so if Tesla tries to fight it and it doesn't work, and Delaware's like, nah, ruling's fair, it has to be rescinded, what's going to end up happening? Elon's going to get paid exactly the amount he's owed. Okay, so nothing changes from a float perspective. The shares will vest and the float will go up, which will dilute investors. He will get his $55 billion. There's zero net impact to the valuation of the company from that perspective. And the firm that brought the lawsuit forward will get paid probably hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, for winning that court case. So a ruling that was meant to protect investors, in the end, hurts investors, because Elon's going to get his package anyway, because people voted yes. So all Tesla's doing now is they're just going to forego earnings, like $1 billion, whatever that number is, to pay for the firm that brought this lawsuit forward, for which a judge said, yes, this is whatever. You win. Here's the case, and then the lawyers get paid a bunch of money. It's fucking crazy. I don't understand it at all. I think it just makes no sense to me whatsoever. It just, the ruling itself makes no sense. Like it being rescinded makes no sense. Find the company, find the company. Okay. Oops. oh, we're just gonna pretend that people really weren't that knowledgeable about that this is Elon's company, and the reason why people are invested in the company is because Elon's the person who's driving it. Like, I don't know why people are having a tough time understanding that. Like, you really think people are Tesla investors because of the board? No, they're Tesla investors because they have a singular person who happens to be one of the most brilliant engineers in the world, who has a fantastic business acumen, who has proven time and time again that he can create a bunch of value for investors. That's why people are invested in Tesla. It's not no more simple than that. And for a judge to say investors don't know any better is fucking crazy. It's like anti-capitalist. Truly, it is. It's really got me worked up the more I think about it. What do you think,
Yeah,
Hans?
it's just the nanny state, like, in action. Like, she took it upon herself to say, "You were too stupid, investors, to know what you were doing," even though the decision that you made you a boatload of money. You
Yeah.
were dumb. And now I need to protect you because you were dumb for making decisions that you as an investor benefited very greatly from. Like, the only investors who did not benefit greatly from this were short sellers or short-term traders who missed the timing. And those are not investors. Those are people that are, they're doing whatever
Yeah.
they're doing, but they
Gamblers.
don't need protecting. Yeah, they're gamblers. And so the people that actually were providing the service of giving capital to a business to execute on one of the most important transitions the world has gone through in moving from fossil fuels to EVs, like, the support of the shareholders is part of what made it possible for Tesla to be in the situation, combined obviously with Elon's incredible ability to assemble a team, motivate them with an incredible mission, and execute like nobody's business. And exactly what you said earlier, like, the reason that I have a large holding in Tesla is because Elon controls the company. I know that he has major influence over the board. That's why I like the company, because
Yeah.
I believe in him and I want him to control my money, because you know what? He's really good at it.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? It's like, okay, so, and again, like, the point is, I think that, if there is a fair point in this whole thing, is that maybe the company needs to be more transparent about how close the board and Elon are, and I think that's a valid point, right? And
But
if
do
there's
you
one,
honestly think that investors didn't understand that? Like,
no,
I think that maybe there are some additional disclosures, but yeah, the question is, okay, if they disclosed all of that stuff, would that have changed anyone's opinion on whether or not they wanted to support that? That, to me, signifies that the judge, like, it wasn't, she was just being very creative in whatever way she could find to punish Tesla and Elon, because if that was a like, she would have to legitimately believe that those disclosures would have materially changed the vote in order for the logic of her judgment to make sense. And I personally 100% disagree that any amount of disclosures about the relationship between Elon and the board would have changed that vote one iota, in which case she is just retroactively enforcing her will on one of the largest companies in the world at the expense of the shareholders, not in benefit of the shareholders.
yeah, 100% agree there. I think the statement you just made of she was trying to rationalize her decision by writing a 200 page essay or whatever, how a book, to try and justify that this should be rescinded, it's like, it makes no sense, because if the end goal here is to protect investors, you're doing the opposite, because you are overruling the will of investors. You are insulting that the voting power, like the voting capability of an investor of a public company. That's all you're doing by doing that. That you somehow know better, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I mean,
it's
it would be
absolutely
one
insane.
thing
Makes no sense.
if the investors had been harmed. Like, I would understand that. Like, I need to protect the investors of FTX who were totally defrauded, and that company, like, investors were not making informed decisions because FTX was being super deceptive. And so in that case, investors do need to be protected. But why do you need to protect investors who won? That's the thing that's so weird about all of this. Like, y'all just did too good in your decision making, and now we must, therefore, in retrospect, punish you. And please give me more of your money.
Yeah, literally. Like she is essentially making a decision of what's fair pay. It's insane. It's completely anti-capitalistic at its core. It makes absolutely no sense. I think so. So what I was going on with, like, as far as like the transparency stuff, right? The one bit of it that I think is fair criticism is that, okay, as a public company, you there are certain rules you have to follow when crafting things, and transparency is very important because you're a public company. And so yes, I fully get that. If there's a issue here, is that the company in its statements or when crafting the pay package, right or wrong, okay, was not transparent in it was not transparent in the relationship between the board and Elon when crafting the pay package. But ultimately, that is completely irrelevant when the package is brought forward. There's very clear outlines of what the tranches need to be, what the targets need to be, and there's very clear transparency on how much Elon himself would get paid based on the tranches that he would achieve, right? If you hit this goal, 10 billion. If you hit this goal, 5 billion, whatever it was, right? And that's what investors voted on. Investors didn't vote on, oh, how did they come up with this package? Investors voted on, does this package make sense for me, and does it make sense for the company, right? So it's like, how they came up with the number is irrelevant in this case, okay? But from a regulatory perspective, when filing that package, I understand if there is an issue with transparency, but that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant when it comes to voting on the actual package. I don't know. It's a very confusing outcome. I just, and listen, what I'm trying not to do is to somehow think that this is some premeditated effort, right? Because we've all seen the President Biden video of we've got ways of looking into Elon. I'm trying very hard not to let that sway how I'm thinking about this. I just think this is a judge that's a little bit overzealous, that made the wrong ruling, that's going to have long-term implications for Delaware. And if anything, when you think about if this is a good or bad thing for Tesla, this is kind of a blessing in disguise, I feel like, because even though investors are going to end up paying for this thing regardless, again, a ruling that was meant to protect investors will actually end up hurting investors, because investors are going to have to pay for the lawyer fees, and Elon's going to get paid anyway, right? I think the move to Texas is going to perhaps usher in a sort of new phase for the company, because number one, I think it's going to deepen the relationship between Texas and Tesla. So things like not being able to sell in the state, which is still an insane thing that Texas is doing, that they don't allow to direct sales in Texas. I think this is yet another bargaining chip that Tesla's going to have, that's going to say, bro, we open a factory, we incorporate it in your state. Abbott, get off your freaking ass and help us out here. This is crazy. Like, actually be a democratic state and a capitalistic state and let people choose. What the hell are you doing, right? Stop sort of bending over for these freaking dealership lobbies. So that's number one. And then the other thing that I think is going to do here is that with this variable being removed now, where they can actually sit down and craft a comp package, they now understand what the ruling is. So this new comp package, obviously with them incorporating in Texas, is going to include the previous pay package that he's owed, plus a new pay package, which is going to have very clear and obvious goals for Elon to hit. And I think it's clear that I think it will motivate him a lot more than it's motivating him now. Not to say that he's not putting in the work, but I think knowing what the targets are going to be, it's going to motivate him to actually put the chips in place that he needs to put in place to get the company to the next sort of leg of its growth and the next leg of its targets. So, this might be like a catalyst of sorts. When I think about, and over the long term, I think this is a nothing burger. If anything, it's a catalyst to move the company forward to where it needs to go. But I'm just so disappointed and the ruling itself because it's just completely nonsensical. And again, this whole thing has been opinion, right? This is my opinion. I welcome people that think about this differently. It just makes no sense. It does the opposite of what it was intending to do.
One of the things that I would definitely say is that obviously I loved Walter Isaacson's biography, and we know that Elon kind of thrives in these situations that are very drama tense. And so I would agree with you that I think that this is going to end up being a catalyst for positive things for Tesla and in a number of other areas as well, just because that this is part of what motivates Elon. And when you said, like, to me, how I think about it is not that he's going to be any more motivated, but I think that he's going to be less worried about risks once this gets solved. And so it's not that he's any less motivated, it's that there are fewer questions about the future that cause him to, try and figure out how he's going to navigate those things. So once all of that gets figured out, I think it'll be a positive thing moving forward. So I just want to expand a little bit on part of what is so frustrating to me specifically is that I feel like one of the things that is really being attacked here that is extremely problematic is incentive based pay. That, part of the reason that this pay package was kind of at risk of being questioned in court in the first place is because it was unprecedented in its level of pay. But I love it because it is absolutely performance based. And this is something that just is not common in the workplace, because unfortunately, one of the things that it puts a flashlight on is merit. That if you use performance based pay, you're saying that some people deserve, based on their performance, to be paid more than other people. And I know that personally in my work history, when I have managed teams, this is something that I have tried to use as much as possible. That I hated paying employees on an hourly basis because the way that the employees could maximize the benefit that they received was to be as slow as possible, to get as little done as possible. And there was nothing in the structuring of the way that they approached their workday that allowed them to actually earn more if they provided more value to the company. And that is terrible for culture and morale of your workforce because your high performers are looking at your slackers and saying, those people are making the same amount of money that I'm making to put out 50% of the work or 30% of the work or 20% of the work, or I don't have to do any work. Like the one of the things that it allows for in the company is for a lazy person or a person who is maybe not lazy but just creative and observant. I cannot do my job at all, and they're going to make that person who's a high performer come over here and do my job for me, and I'm literally going to do zero and I'm going to get paid. He's going to have double the work and he's going to get paid the exact same as me. And that is super problematic because it is just a drag on the overall productivity of the system. And when you manage a company, you understand that that is not sustainable. If that is the culture that exists in your company, like, that is very dangerous. And you are probably going to find yourself staring down bankruptcy very quickly if that becomes the pervasive culture in your company. And so one of the things that was great about this pay package, and I loved it because it was unprecedented, that Elon made nothing if he didn't perform, but if he performed decently, he made okay money. And then if he way, way overperformed, then he got way, way paid. And that, in my opinion, as a shareholder, is the perfect incentive structure for a CEO. I don't want to invest in companies where you have CEOs who are incentivized based on just not letting the company go down too much from where they are now. Like this playing not to lose culture that exists in many, many corporations is super unappealing to me as an investor. I don't want to invest in those type of companies. I want to invest in companies where the board and the CEO win when I win. And that is really at the core of what this judge was questioning. She's like, it's very unfair for this person to make more money than anyone has ever made. And like the quantity of money that he made was really the issue that she was focused on. And what I'm saying is the way that he made that money was way more important than how much money he made. He made that money by executing. And it is more than fair when you think about it in terms of percentages that he essentially 20x'd the stock. And for that 20xing of the stock, his ownership of the company roughly doubled. I am more than happy to roughly double the CEO's ownership of my company if he can provide 20x gains to me as a shareholder. Like, if you offered that deal to investors, 100 out of 100 investors are going to take that deal every single time. And it's because if he doesn't perform, you don't pay him. But if you win massively, then heck yeah, that dude deserves to be paid. And so it's frustrating that, going back to the nanny state point, a judge thinks that just because he was so good at his job that puts at question his deservedness to earn a large amount of money. And the thing is, like, he created so much value, and the money is just really a measuring stick of how much societal change Elon has catalyzed. That the reason that Tesla is one of the most valuable companies in the world is because it is providing one of the most valuable services to the world in transitioning us into sustainable energy. And so that's why I feel like this is really, honestly, her ruling is a slap in the face of humanity, because we're taking the singular person who is most responsible for solving climate change, one of the world's most pressing problems of the next 50 years. And we're telling him, you know what? You need to do that out of the goodness of your heart, and we are not going to pay you a dime. Like, how ungrateful and messed up is it when you frame it in those terms? Like, this person, above all, should be recognized and paid for what he's going to do, especially when you realize the fact that you know exactly what he's going to do with that money. He's going to plow it into solving the next big problem, and he's going to do it more effectively than any other CEO or person could possibly do it. And so it's like, we're not going to recognize you for catalyzing this incredible change that we need, and we're trying to solve in 100 other ways that are not going to work. And this way that is working, we're going to punish. Oh, and then on top of that, we're going to take $55 billion out of the pocket of the man who is most effective at solving this challenge and is most qualified to solve the next challenge. Like, I want him to have the resources at his disposal that he needs to make us a multi-planetary species. Like, that's the Mars money that she's trying to take away from him. And I'm excited about humanity actually being able to expand into the rest of the solar system. And it frustrates me that she thinks that because he was so good at his job, he doesn't deserve the resources necessary to serve humanity in the next big problem.
Isn't it weird that when you have somebody that is capable, like has sort of broken the mold of what it means to be hyper productive, like how there are things that just keep that thing from happening? Isn't that the weirdest thing ever? I think that's proof that for some reason our society just is either afraid to embrace that, doesn't trust embracing that. We think that there's something inherently unfair about doing that. But what gets missed here is that the pie is growing for everybody by doing this. The economy is not finite. Value is not finite, right? Stuff like this is what makes the pie bigger for everybody. Like the company growing from $30 to $50 billion in market cap to $650 billion to $1 trillion in market cap, whatever it is at now, $600 billion. That didn't just make him a bunch of money. That made literally every single person that had Tesla stock a bunch of money. And it's going to create thousands upon hundreds of thousands upon millions of jobs in the long term. And it's going to help humanity become more fruitful, as long as you're willing to be part of that story, right? And maybe it becomes a model for other companies. Maybe it becomes a model for other CEOs. And I think what I'm trying to like come to terms with is that, I'm trying my hardest not to just fall into the trap of Elon is perfect. Elon does everything perfectly. He is the greatest person that has ever lived, right? I think he is a human being that has flaws. Some of those flaws actually make him more endearing, to be honest. But he does have things that he has to work on. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the dude is singularly the most productive CEO on planet Earth right now. And if you don't agree with that, you're just not looking at the facts. You're not looking at what has happened in the last 10 years as it pertains to Tesla, as it pertains to SpaceX, and what's happening with full self-driving technology, manufacturing electric vehicles, lowering the costs of transportation down to a point where it's going to be cheaper to drive an EV than a gas car, which is going to help everybody. Because you're not going to have a thing in your garage that if you leave on, for longer than a few minutes with the garage door closed, it's not going to end up killing your entire family in the house. You're actually going to have a thing that's going to cost less to run on a per mile basis, and it's not going to kill you when it's just parked in the garage, turned on. So it's like that gets missed in this entire discussion, So I don't know, man. I agree with what you just said 100%. I think it's just it highlights that for progress to exist, society has to fight through stuff like this. And that's where I'm hopeful, because something like this had to happen. Something like this had to happen for, I think, people to understand that there are ceilings, these arbitrary ceilings that exist that do not judge a specific outcome fairly, and they just exist for arbitrary reasons, for reasons that don't necessarily make sense. And disruption and progress feel uncomfortable because of exactly what just happened. Like this is a perfect example of why disruption and progress is so uncomfortable and why it's so difficult, because you're going to face stuff like this constantly. This is probably just the beginning on it. This is probably just like a little taste of what's to come as Tesla, SpaceX, and all these companies start going from, hundreds of billions of dollars of valuation to trillions of dollars of valuation, and potentially even more in the future as the economy transforms, as society transforms, as technology transforms, as transportation transforms. And he just happens to be the person that's at the forefront leading the charge. And the way capitalism works is that person is going to win the most, because he's putting in the most work and he's creating the most value. If you don't like that, which you're more than welcome to not like, you just don't like capitalism. That's how capitalism works. It rewards the ones that put in the most work and bring the most value. There are people that abuse it, but in this case, I don't think we have a person that abuses it. Yeah.
Yeah. It should be providing the most value, not necessarily like you can be more productive with less inputs of labor if you figure out how to be more efficient. And that's one of the things that Elon is great at. And so it's not necessarily like he obviously does put in an insane amount of work when you look at, the breadth of what all he's doing. And his pain threshold and his tolerance to just work like a madman is incredible. So I wouldn't take away from any of that, but I would say that the biggest thing that has earned him
value creation
is the amount of value that he's created. Yep. So I would say that this is terrible. Like, I think that he should not only should he here. Let me go back and start over. Obviously, this is not really a good thing for Delaware. Like, we know already that there is a ton of attention that has been now focused on this decision. And I'm sure that CEOs, executives, boards all over the country are now asking themselves the question, like, do I want to continue to be incorporated in Delaware? If this, like, it creates risk now and uncertainty for me as a fiduciary, for me legally in the responsibilities that I have to uphold. If this is the type of decision that can be made to question us and potentially make us liable in the future for things, we need to move. And so I think there's already quite a bit of activity of people looking to leave. And we know that, Delaware has an 8.7% corporate tax rate. And while that is favorable when you compare it to other states, the fact that Delaware has become this status quo standard for national and international public companies to incorporate there it means that they have an outsized number of corporations that are legally headquartered there and are going to be paying, some amount of that tax is going to be going to Delaware. And if we begin to see a flight out of Delaware by corporations, not just Tesla, I mean, one of the things that we've seen is the fact that Elon, in many instances, leads on company policy and corporate culture. That a lot of other business leaders look up to him, they admire him, they follow his leading on a number of different issues. We've seen it already, for example, with the layoffs that he had to do at Twitter, that, you actually can operate a software company much, much, much more efficiently than many companies are operating currently. He showed that that was possible. And then, a number of other companies followed suit. And I think this is going to be the same type of thing, is that a number of other companies now, both because they are afraid of the liability that they could be put in because of this ruling, but also because they realize, wait a second, like, I've just made this assumption that Delaware is where I need to be, and I never even shopped around. Like, maybe I can get a better deal for my company by voting with my feet to leave. And this brings me to the point of one of the things that I love about America, I love about our system, and I think this is one of the greatest checks and balances that we have as a nation, is the fact that we have 50 different states. Each state has its own set of legal precedent and, laws, rules, and all of this. And so we are basically running 50 experiments in parallel on a whole number of different dimensions. We have different experiments on what type of social laws we want to have. We have different experiments on what type of business atmosphere we want to have. We have different experiments on how we want to handle local governments. And all of these things are running in parallel. And when one state is really lagging or falling behind on an important metric, people not only have the freedom, but they actually do vote with their feet to leave and take their resources, their creativity, their productivity, their ingenuity, and move that to somewhere that is more favorable for them. And this is the fact that we have this allows us to put a check and balance. So yes, this activist judge fully has the right to make the decision and judge the way that she saw fit within the framework. And then Tesla, as a corporation incorporated in the United States of America, has the freedom to say, okay, if this is the regulatory framework that is set up here in Delaware, then I am free to pack up my crap and get out. And I'm going to do that. And so that puts a lot of this, it's uncomfortable, it's messy, just like we talk about with disruption. Like, this parallel process of experimenting with social and legal frameworks is not clean. And that's one of the things that frustrates many Americans. But in the long term, this freedom and this, parallel experimentation process is what allows us to continue to be such a generative society over the course of, many hundreds of years, and to lead the world in many ways. And obviously there's a lot of things that we're not doing very well at right now, and we need to get better, but we have the process in place to do the experiments necessary to get to the solutions that need to happen. And, in this instance, I think Texas is going to be a big winner from this. And that, like we've talked about earlier, a lot of these issues are absolutely going to get solved, and they're just not going to get solved in Delaware, because Delaware has basically forfeited the right to be home to one of the world's largest companies.
And I think what you just said also highlights that the uniqueness of a company like Tesla that's willing to wade through the mess, right? How many companies would be faced with a challenge of similar magnitude or similar complexity, and they'll just take it on the chin, and they'll be like, okay, we just got to figure out how to, quote unquote, do better next time, how to reduce the risk of this happening again, right? And then they're stuck. They're stuck in that situation, and then they become less and less willing to take the risks that they need to fulfill the vision of the business. But instead, what happens is, let's just not do that again so it doesn't hurt our ability to make more money, right? Whereas Tesla is like, nah, screw that. We're going to go to the place where we can maximally execute our goals. And that's the beauty behind a company like that. And I think this is like such a perfect example for business leaders that really want to build businesses that that really fulfill their maximum potential. Like, feel comfortable feeling uncomfortable, baby. Like, this is the bigger risks you take, the bigger your company becomes, the more value you create. You're going to become a magnet for parasites. You're just going to become a magnet for parasites. You're going to become a magnet for people that want to leech off that whatever you're building in some way, and they'll try to poke holes at you, and find the holes, find the weaknesses, find the places where your shield is weak, it's not as strong as it should be, and sometimes those people win, and sometimes those people find the weaknesses, and they try to exploit them, and sometimes when they're trying to exploit them, you also have a ruling from a judge's perspective that takes a problem that's maybe this big, and then she takes a freaking hammer to it, and then supersedes the system, and she turns into like a referee that says, oh wait, no, that shield shouldn't have been there in the first place. And then you're like, what the hell? What kind of rules are these? This is not the game we're playing. This is not capitalism. You just went in and just superseded the rules of how I'm supposed to be playing the game, and again, Tesla's uniqueness is that they are not willing to just take it on the chin. They're going to be, they're going to take it on the chin and be like, okay, well, guess what? I'm going to go to a place where I can actually become the thing that I'm trying to become instead of playing by your stupid freaking rules. I'm going to go to a place where I can play by the rules by which capitalism is allowing me to play in, without trying to be disrupted by some, referee that doesn't play by the same rules.
I think if you go back to the corporate mindset, or the mindset of the management team of Tesla, and how uncommon that is, and it's one of the reasons that they've been able to accomplish what they've been able to accomplish. Like, I think 9 companies out of 10, or 95 companies out of 100, or whatever it is, they would have consulted with legal on that comp package, and legal would have been like, yeah, there's never been a comp package that works like this. No, we're not going to do it. And that would have been the end of the discussion right there. And that CEO would never have the skin in the game that Elon ended up with, and the motivation to do it. So it's a combination of the motivation, having the rewards in place for achieving these ridiculous goals, but also that confidence that not only is this something that's possible, but whatever comes up, you know what? We're going to be flexible and adaptable and creative enough, and have the confidence in ourselves that we can solve those problems. And like, those two things go hand in hand. Like, if you think you are that person, you definitely want to have the carrot at the end of the road, that if you have to be ridiculously resourceful and creative and have all that confidence and be able to overcome almost anything that stands in your way, then you better bet your butt that you're going to want to be paid for that effort on the back end. And so, it's a combination of that creativity and confidence, and then aligned incentives, that is what makes Tesla so unique. And there just, are so few companies that really work that way. But it's why we love the company. I think one of the other silver linings of this is that it does once again kind of show us who's who. That I think this is, regardless of, I don't want to speculate about how connected she was to the Biden administration and how politically motivated this was. I don't think it necessarily has to be overt. I think it could very easily, and is more likely to be the case, that she just exists in a bubble of progressive thought that really dislikes capitalism to begin with, dislikes billionaires, and she is offended by Elon as a person for a number of reasons. The fact that she mentioned how he doesn't deserve this pay package because his focus has been so split. Well, when did that become a topic of conversation? That was not until after he acquired Twitter, which was after this pay package was even awarded. So
why is it up to her to decide? Who is she to decide how he is performing?
I don't know. I think the shareholders should decide that personally.